as soon as Senator Shaheen announced that she would not be seeking another term, uh, observers, probably nationally, but observers in New Hampshire knew that the snowball was about to start rolling down the hill in terms
Yeah.
of political engagement,
Yeah.
and that is not disappointed.
No, that's for sure. It's awesome. I mean, to me, that's one of the best parts of this state. It's like people are fired up regardless of what's happening. It's so engaged all year, every year, the off season. There's no off season, which I love.
There is no off season. It's for me, being a lifelong New England sports fan. That's how I feel about it too. There is no, like, I'm a big football fan. I'm ready for free agency in March. I'm ready for the draft in May. They're going to announce the full schedule tomorrow night. It's like Christmas in May.
Yeah.
It never ends, and I think that politics is a sport of sorts here as well,
Oh
and
yeah.
it never ends.
Yes. Yes.
Which,
Definitely.
given that it's 12:30, that's probably not a bad place to end the pregame for those of you that jumped on early and to start. Thank you all so far have jumped on. I think we'll have folks jumping on as we go forward. I'm Steve Marchand. If you're on, this is probably read the Substack. I do the politics of New Hampshire with Steve Marchand. We nerd out, but there's thousands of people that like to nerd out about New Hampshire politics. So we're glad you joined us. Hope to be doing this on a pretty regular basis, certainly a weekly basis, whenever we have interesting things and people, things to talk about, people with whom to discuss it. And we're really lucky because we have somebody really interesting who I've known for a number of years in a different capacity as sort of the subject of inquiry from a national political reporter and a native of New Hampshire, which obviously made it an even more novel connection going back a number of years. But now, as some of you may know, our guest Hanna Trudo is thinking about running for Congress in the open first CD seat that Chris Pappas is vacating to run for the U.S. Senate. So, Hanna, I'm so appreciative that you're joining us. And I think some folks know a little bit about you and your professional work, but I don't want to assume that, So thank
Yeah.
you for being on, and I want to just let's roll the ball. Tell us a little bit about yourself, where you're from, and what you've been doing that takes you to this point today.
Yeah, thank you, Steve, so much for that intro. It's great to be with you. It's great to see you. I love that you're doing Substack, and it's just awesome to do this kind of platform and to have these, early conversations in kind of a casual way. I think it's something that's been missing from both the media and the political sphere. So it's just good for me to be able to connect with you on this platform specifically. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Hanna Trudo. I'm, like Steve mentioned, born and raised in New Hampshire, dating back 4 generations. And my great grandfather emigrated from Greece to Concord and ran a diner called Louis' Diner. For anybody who may be listening, who may remember that name, it's no longer in existence, but grew up, established that and ran that for a number of years. And both sides of my family have been here for many, many generations, still live here. And so we come from, a deep pride of Granite Staters, deep pride of New Hampshire folks. My family grew up mostly in Amherst, and I have direct relatives in Milford. We also have members of the family in Concord, some in Manchester. So we're a little bit all over the place, but mostly southern New Hampshire overall. Um, have basically, so my upbringing here was I was raised by a single mom. And, like many people in the state, grew up paycheck to paycheck. She didn't have the opportunity to go to college. She couldn't afford to. She hasn't been able to afford to buy a home. So when we talk about kind of the working class work ethic and that mentality in the state, it's so deeply ingrained in who I am and how I approach the world, how I approach my life, how I approach politics. It's something that I really feel like I can't escape, and I wouldn't want to even if I could. I think my mom's early roots in the Greek diner and her family, instilled this sense of work ethic in me. Like we were talking about maybe before we went live, but I worked my first job here at Dunkin' Donuts right on 101A, and kind of carrying along in the family service tradition of food service and really just hardworking people. And so my dad's side of the family, my grandparents were very involved in my upbringing. They started in Milford and were also in Amherst. Over the years, they were deeply, deeply involved in the congregational church in town and also the public school system. So my grandma actually was the principal of my elementary school, Clark School in Amherst. Not while I was there,
I was gonna
but
say a lot of pressure. Yeah.
but she was the principal, was very very deeply involved in the public school community around, in not just in Amherst but in Mount Vernon and in some of the surrounding towns. And my mom worked in the Milford School District as a Title I reading aide. So we have a deep sort of education background. And I think so much of bring what ties me here, what keeps me here, is my family has always sort of reminded me of my roots here. And I was the only person in my immediate family to leave to be a reporter, and I will get to that. But I went away to go to DC and to report on politics. But they've always reminded me of my roots here, and I've been really lucky that they have been within a mile or 2 mile radius of each other my whole life here. So it's been wonderful to call this state home and to always be able to have it as my home base.
So you touched on the journalism and the working class roots. So, what inspired you? What drew you to the field of journalism and eventually to political journalism?
Yes. So it's funny because everyone assumes, because, we are the state that we are, that I grew up in this sort of activist political environment, which was not the case. I didn't do a lot of the First in the Nation stuff growing up because I didn't, like a lot of people, I didn't think that politics affected me. I didn't think that I could do anything. It's sort of when you're a kid, you don't know that your voice can make a difference. And I was quickly disabused of that thought when I first got to DC. And so I graduated from Sauhegan High School in Amherst, and went to college in Boston and spent a little bit of time reporting in the Middle East. My last semester of college, it was right around the Arab Spring time. So right after that happened. And I grew a deeper appreciation for the role of journalists here in the US. It was my major in college, but having that perspective of reporting from the Middle East, I came back with a different view of how important our First Amendment freedoms are here. And obviously, I take it really seriously, this live free or die spirit. So I thought, okay, you know what? I'm going to DC. I don't have a job. I don't have any money. It was incredibly hard to break in because, like politics, the media is very corporate. It's a very top heavy kind of industry. And so if you don't have a family that can write a letter to the editor, make a connection with an editor or give you a bunch of money for an apartment up front, it's a harder barrier of entry. And so I sort of worked a bunch of odd jobs. I slept on like a used mattress on the floor for a long time just to basically convince people to let me intern for free. And so interning for free this was 14 years ago now, was the way to get in your foot in the door. It doesn't matter if you can't afford to do it, you have to figure it out. So that's what I did. I worked a bunch of, odd jobs, finally got my foot in the door, and then ended up in an entry level job at Politico, which is, I think, where we first must have connected.
I think so.
Um,
Yeah.
yeah. So so that was I'd say entry level generously. It was pretty much the lowest level job imaginable. I was a web producer on the night shift, which just meant that like I covered the news that people were sleeping through it and somebody had to be there awake to cover it. And fortunately, it was the 2016 election, and so it was the first real instance where I saw, oh my God, not just the rise of Trump, but the rise of Bernie, which we saw here up close. And so it was this confluence of like, holy shit, we're seeing Trump rise. We can't believe it in the media, and we're seeing Bernie rise. We can't believe it in the media for a whole different set of reasons. And so, coming from New Hampshire, I had that mindset of like, yes, both of these politicians can rise, both of them can be popular. There's a tremendous amount of energy. I mean, you remember it from the early days. It's a lot of the folks, that energy was there on both sides. And so the media definitely was not catching up to the moment at the time, but here in New Hampshire, people were. And so I kind of approached it from that perspective. I did one of the early stories at Politico on Bernie's rise, and used that to pivot into a job. I eventually landed at the Daily Beast in 2020 and led our coverage of Joe Biden's successful campaign, but from the primary days when everybody thought that he was going to lose, which
Yeah.
I was here with him in a church basement. I don't remember the town it was, but it was somewhere in the North Country, I believe. And he had like 10 people in the audience. It was the early days of his primary campaign, which you remember were not good for him. So followed him through here, through South Carolina, across the primary, traveled, through some of the battlegrounds, and eventually to the general. So we saw what happened there. And I remember thinking at the time, and I reported, quite critically on his campaign throughout the cycle because for a lot of obvious reasons. Um, it seemed to me like, yes, it could have been an effective campaign to win, and it was against Trump, but it seemed to me like a band-aid kind of campaign where it's his sole goal is to beat Trump and uphold the status quo otherwise. And what we see now, so I guess in between what we see now and back then. So I completed that election. I was tapped throughout that time. I had an eye on the Bernie movement because Bernie was the runner up for most of the primary. He was kind of neck and neck with Biden, as you remember. And so I was tapped into that world kind of from the early 2016 days. And after the 2020 race, I was really honored. I was approached by The Hill to create, which is where I was for the past almost 4 years, to create an entirely new beat for them, which was covering progressives. And I say progressives loosely, that includes everybody from the economic populists to the working class Democrats to the actual, progressive coalition in Congress as it exists. And everything in between. And I've really spent my past decade or so covering loosely the Democratic Party and the various factions of it with the progressive wing.
So that's an interesting point right there. As you see it now, and you've got this unique perspective because you've had it from the journalist perspective for a long time now, and you've watched going back to early Bernie 2015 to the present time. Of course, we're still in an era where Trump dominates the politics and Bernie remains, along with AOC and perhaps a couple of others, the most galvanizing individuals in the Democratic Party. So, those factions, how do you see those factions kind of divvying up right now at a time when the Democratic Party seems like it's trying to figure out what our identity is?
Yeah.
I say our. I'm a lifelong Democrat, obviously, and what we want to be, and how we take these different parts to create enough harmony that we can have a wide enough tent to win elections. How do you
Yes.
see that playing out in these different lanes of the Democratic Party?
I mean, it's so interesting because I've never known a time in politics professionally where Trump hasn't been in the mix. So from that first election, I've covered 5 elections, including the midterms, and Trump has always dominated the conversation. But what we've seen in the Democratic side is that Bernie's message from 2015, 2016 is the same message as now. And there's something to be said about now, of course, we're talking about things like the oligarchy because we're modernizing it from the actual reality, the threat of what's actually happening in this day. But the core message back then is the core message that's resonating now. And people in New Hampshire, I mean, when I say I'm proud to be from the state and to have my whole family from here, we have felt this viscerally for so long. Having that working class background of living paycheck to paycheck, so much of the things that he's talked about over the years, I relate to on a personal level. My entire family relates to it. And so I feel like his message of income inequality, of the very wealthiest people at the top, I mean, it's only exploded, but ultimately it's an anti-corruption message. And what I think he's done really well is call out his own party for saying, what we're doing is not effective. We are not going to win. Every election cycle, I can't tell you the amount of times I've reported the same story about why and how Democrats keep losing the working class. They keep failing the people that they claim to represent, that they claim to court as part of their base. And Bernie has been one of the only consistent voices for the past decade. And, some folks have joined in that effort, of course, but really at the national level, loudly saying, we are failing the working class. Our strategy is not working. We are way too focused on corporate interests. We are way too focused on special interest in our own party. We'll get to the Republicans, but we have to fix our own party. How can we compete? And so when I'm having conversations with people on the ground and exploring the idea of a run myself, it's with that mentality where people are really, really pissed. And I don't have to tell you that. I mean, this is like serious stuff. I think the status quo, the business as usual approach that the Democratic Party at both the national level and of course the state level, we see it across different states. We see it here no different than in other states. They're very resistant to changing. They want to talk about changing. They will say we have to do something different. But when it comes time to elevate different voices, in my view, the working class and those who are familiar with the working class experience, it's always a resistance. It's always, let's elevate the people who have waited in line. And it's not a personal critique, it's a party-wide problem that we're seeing come into full view. And I think people deserve to have that message talked. They deserve to hear that. They deserve to hear somebody say it and say, we have a problem. It's not because we don't like the Democrats or we want to be mean. We want the Democratic Party to be an actual fighter opposition party so that we can start delivering. It's not enough just to win elections. And we talk about, oftentimes we play pundit and we say, and you know this as well as anyone, we say, oh, who can win? Can the moderate win? Can the progressive win? There's always this inclination to take the assumption that the center of the political spectrum, the moderate, the middle, is the one who can win. And I fundamentally reject that, especially in this state.
Yeah.
This is an independent-minded state.
It's funny the way there was a New York Times op-ed yesterday from we would generally consider conservative U.S. Missouri Senator Josh Hawley, and he has been rumored as a future presidential candidate. He's certainly an ambitious guy. He wrote a very direct column that if I didn't tell you who had written it, it was about how Republicans cannot be cutting Medicaid.
Yes.
You cannot be touching this at a time. He says, not only does our base support it, our base needs it. Our base, he says, the Republican base disproportionately accesses Medicaid and related services programs.
Yes.
He's like, if we're going to be the working class party, we are going to have to reflect policies that working class people are really counting on in order to get by, much less to thrive, which is making the conservative, moderate, liberal monikers harder to apply, it seems, at least compared to, my Gen X, Ronald Reagan era.
So true.
This doesn't seem to fit so well right now.
It doesn't, but that's the opportunity for Democrats. That is a perfect example. It's like Josh Hawley should not be the one to make that argument. We should be the ones to make that argument, loudly on any platform that will have us. We can go to Republican, conservative media outlets, whoever will have us. That is the message that we should not be allowing Josh Hawley to make if we want to be serious about winning. We have to be able to dominate that argument and say, we are the working class. But first, nobody trusts us to make that argument because of how we've acted historically. And I go back to that early Bernie movement. There was so much energy and promise and hope for that movement, and it was squashed and it fizzled out, but it was still there under the surface. And so now this is the first time that I've covered, in the 10 years I've covered politics, that I see a genuine desire from all sorts of Democrats across the ideological spectrum, all different kinds of people. I'm talking about establishment people, donors that I would never have thought have heard these kinds of things from, say, in my reporting, basically say, we need to do something seriously different now. This is not, we can't use the Band-Aid approach because winning is not enough. We're not just going to win and say, "Oh, look at us, we won," and then change nothing and expect to have the trust of the people. So to me, it's like when people talk about who can win, first of all, like I said, I fundamentally reject that the centrist middle ground approach is what wins. We are a state that Bernie won twice, that has that populist energy. People are fired up. It's a there's so many working people in the state that feel left out, understandably, including my family. Like it's a very diverse kind of coalition of independents, people who may have voted for Bernie and Trump, people who are disaffected Democrats who feel politically homeless. And so the Josh Hawleys of the world are making inroads because they're taking that argument. I mean, why aren't the Democrats taking that approach and saying our base relies on Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security. My mom relies on Social Security. I have family members who rely on Medicaid. I mean, part of the again, just kind of back to the reason of why I'm potentially looking at this is because so few members of Congress are from working class backgrounds. And that is it's no different than the media. So few people in the media are from working class backgrounds. So what stories are reflected? They're very, very infrequently the stories of the working class. And then we wonder, well, why did nobody cover it? It's like the Democratic Party has made inroads in diversity in other ways, which is great. But that resistance to elevating voices who represent the working class experience, whoever they happen to be, even if they haven't waited their turn, even if they are considered party outsiders or people who haven't been in the party apparatus, those are the people that we should be welcoming in to the party, especially at a moment like this after a Trump win.
It's funny. There's a good friend of mine here on the Seacoast. We were having breakfast recently, and he would be a self-described liberal, um, and has been. I've known him for 20 years, and he said to me, he had read some stuff I'd written on Substack, and he's like, I'm still a Democrat, he says, but I find interesting that as we appropriately seek diversification of opportunity by race and gender and sexual orientation. He's like, awesome, keep it
Yeah.
going. He's like, what I'm afraid of is that my party has forgotten that there are other sorts of diversity that
Yeah.
are also really important. And I said, what do you mean? And he said, specifically, socioeconomic diversity. He goes, Steve, when you go in rooms and, with a lot of activists in it, how many of them don't have a 4-year degree?
Yes.
How many of them don't have a master's degree? I like that. The majority of Americans don't have a college degree. Our, the median income, I think, is lower than a lot of the rooms of activists that I and others will be in. And
Yes.
without those voices as part of the process, and both parties,
Yes.
then you don't have enough people that know what it's like to be sweating it out, paycheck to paycheck, and that's another form of diversity that I don't want us to lose as we appropriately seek to continue to seek diversity in many other areas. We don't want to lose that economic diversity.
100%. And it's so critical. I mean, that's exactly it. It's no different than being, in the rooms that you're in with activists. It's the same kind of thing. The rooms I've been in DC, it's like it's mind-boggling to when people are doing this analysis of, why do we keep losing this group and why it's like they can't fundamentally understand it. And it's not even really their fault. They just don't have those voices at the table. And I think, one of the things when we look at who's qualified to run or whatever, that a lot of that landscape is changing because people are realizing this isn't necessarily a left versus center kind of a moment. This is an outsider versus insider kind of thing. And I don't necessarily mean outside of politics. You can be within politics also, but are you willing to take an outsider's view of what the party is doing and has done? Because to me, as a journalist, I've looked at this objectively over the years, and I've been able to see, okay, there are major missteps, but what happens within, and this within the party apparatus, is there's a lot of echo chambers of, we're doing the right thing, and that happens at local, state, national. It happens throughout the party, and on both parties, of course, but just for the sake of this, the Democratic Party, and I think there's a real hunger for something that isn't that, and some of the working class stuff. I mean, we're talking about the word fighter. Who wants to be a fighter? Who's going to be, who's going to fight for you in DC? These are kind of the buzzwords that we throw around. And again, every election cycle has them. This year is the year of the fire, which is fine with me. I've been fighting my whole life, so I'm like cool with that word. But the reason that I think we're going to see different kinds of candidates this cycle is because people who are used to fighting don't have a choice. They grew up in a mentality where they're fighting for different things. They're fighting to be the first in their family to go to college. They're fighting for the chance of, making a living wage where maybe their parents weren't able to. That is so ingrained in our vast working class population, regardless of race, gender, religion, regardless of that, which is what Bernie's campaign, arguably first and second time, really tapped into. They tapped into that fighter spirit. And now it's kind of like we've been waiting for the rest of the Democratic Party to catch up, but the base is activated. I mean, as well as anyone, this state in particular is ready to fight. Like, we are ready to build an opposition party to Trump, whether establishment Democrats want to or not. There's an appetite for that kind of message, and I'm really encouraged just in having these early conversations with people, because the more and more I talk to people, the more I'm hearing like, oh yeah, that is something we really want. Why haven't we been offered that yet? And so whether it's me or not me to deliver that, I think just somebody acknowledging that that appetite is there is really important in this kind of moment. We don't have to wait to the midterms to beat the Republicans at the ballot, but like we can start now in terms of
I,
bringing this message.
I think you're right about the current moment. I did dozens of events starting in December of last year, and in the first few months, stay through early February or so, the vibe of activists was a combination of shock. It was morose. It was sad. There was a sadness, like, maybe the country isn't where I thought it was
Yes.
or was going, and wanted an explanation. What happened? What were the numbers? And then as we got to later February, March, April, the vibe had changed a little bit more into, tell me more about the kind of voters that we used to get that
Yes.
have left the party, and they're
Yes.
not uniform. They're in a few buckets. And now what I'm very excited about is I'm seeing much more of this. So what are we going to do? Get practical. I'm fired up. I'm going to rallies. I'm going to protests. That's feeding that energy. But now I want to take that and add on this much more practical element of, how do we win more elections
Yes.
in ways that I'm excited and proud to be a Democrat, because the message we're delivering is coming from here, and we can win on that. And I
Yeah.
think that's the kind of energy. It's not too early for people to kick the tires on campaigns, to announce candidates, to work in the trenches. I think the activists are ready for that. And one thing I thought about, you and your background in particular, you may have a unique perspective on this. One of the things that we found last fall that the Trump campaign did well was identify lower engagement voters
Mm-hmm.
who once upon a time used to be default Democrats,
Yes.
right? And now have pretty clearly moved towards the Republican Party, or at least Trump and his brand of the Republican Party. And it means that we Democrats are trying to find the platforms, the outlets
Yes.
to connect with folks that aren't necessarily going to read the Hill every day.
Mm.
But right now, when they're voting, I mean, they got an opinion. How do you see, especially given your unique career experiences in this regard,
Yeah.
how can you reach out to folks and make that connection to folks that maybe aren't going to be going to the Wilton Democrats event, on a third
Yeah.
Tuesday in June kind of thing?
Yeah, I love that. I mean, and that's the thing. It's like, I really believe this is kind of cliche, and I hate any type of thing that sounds like a soundbite, but I really truly think we have to be everywhere. Like, we have to, if we want to be serious about building a different kind of coalition that I believe it will take to win, and to engage people, and to build the kind of Democratic Party that we deserve, that people do deserve, that have been waiting for many, many years, not just the recent years. I think we have to be willing to go absolutely everywhere that will have us. That's critical. That includes, I mean, you've written about the need for podcasts, and how there's, a lot of the talk has been about the shifting spaces. Where are the new spaces we've seen? I mean, I've seen over the years the diminished impact of traditional news outlets. Traditional, people are losing their jobs. I mean, and even more so, as much as we embrace these new platforms, Substack, podcasts, a whole host of things, um, we have to also remember that, like, we are under attack in the first our freedom of press is under attack now. Like, it's not a theoretical thing. This is I've mentioned, I've written very critically about Biden over the years. The Biden people have never once threatened me at all. Just because they didn't like, I mean, they've been mad at me because they don't like some of the things I wrote. But, like, we're seeing that in a whole different level. It's an autocratic regime that we're dealing with. We're inching towards that style of government, and we have to say that in terms of the media conversation, because the first, doctrine of the autocrat playbook is this clamping down on the free press, is to cut, we're seeing it. Like, this isn't a theoretical thing. And I think Democrats who are not talking about that, I mean, of course, this is my bias coming from the media, but, like, this should impact everyone. Every single person should be aware that this is not a theoretical debate. This is a real debate. So that's even more imperative for us to get our message out wherever we can, in more uncensored platforms and more sort of freewheeling platforms, because as traditional outlets lose their influence, and it's incredibly sad to say. I mean, my colleagues in the media, like, are some of the bravest and hardest working people I know, because they go to work every single day fearless. And we have to take that spirit to this moment, wherever our message is. And as a Democratic Party, as individual Democrats, we need to be open. We need to go on the Joe Rogans. We know how that worked out for Kamala, to miss out on it. But everything in between that, at the local level, it's going to be different people, obviously. But we can't shy away from people that don't have our views just because we don't know how to talk off the cuff, or we don't know how to be a real person and everything is rehearsed. Like, that's not going to work in this kind of climate.
It certainly doesn't seem so. I mean, it's interesting to watch in Congress, in the Senate, the national party level, folks trying to do things, sometimes using saltier language, sometimes trying different platforms,
Yeah.
sometimes, like, I think James Carville early on sort of said, let Trump and his administration kind of tucker themselves out,
Oh my
this sort of
goodness.
thing. So, what do you think, we as Democrats, and particularly those in elected office, the strategy that they're employing right now in a really difficult time, as you described, compared to how you think we should be going after it right now? What's the right move for Democrats
Yeah,
in
I mean, I
general?
think there's a couple of people doing things really well right now, as critical as I have been during this half hour. Certainly Bernie and AOC are leading the charge, in my view, of getting out in Republican leaning areas, in places that are not friendly to Democrats. So they didn't ask for permission to do that. They said, we're doing this. There's a need for this. We are out there on our own. Like, take it or leave it. This is our approach. I think, in the House, I think Ro Khanna is somebody who's really, really leaning into this as well. He's been to this in New Hampshire a number of times and really gets it. He was Bernie's co-chair on his campaign in 2020. And so he has that mindset. He comes from that background and kind of viscerally gets this style of going everywhere, talking to people as normal human beings, not being super rehearsed. And he's with the people on their issues. So he's kind of on the right side of things, in my view. I think we even JB Pritzker, who was here not just the other day, a couple weeks ago, delivered a very forceful rebuke of Trump, which was needed and got a lot of attention for the way that he delivered it, and for some of the actual pointed language he used in terms of calling out the tactics of the administration. And he's somebody who's delivered a lot of popular progressive policies in the state. So those are some of the names that come to mind. I mean, I think there's even Cory Booker, and doing a filibuster longer than anybody else. I mean, he may be considered one of the more moderate Democrats, in my view, but he's doing something to get people to acknowledge that people are really pissed. And I think that he has a vital voice in the conversation, and folks like him that are really just sick and tired of the status quo approach, which encompasses everything from the way we do campaigns, the way we talk about policies, the people we approach. the media we go on. I mean, that's what I consider the status quo that is in desperate need of breaking up at this moment. And then we can get to working across the aisle and all of the other things that we're happy to do if we actually start winning and delivering for people. But right now, it's delusional to think we can reach across the aisle. Republicans don't want to work with us. They don't want to work with us right now.
Well,
And so,
here in New Hampshire, they don't have to work with us right now. They have big enough
exactly.
majorities, and there's the cohesion at the state, certainly at the state level, and
Yes,
generally at the congressional level, where they have been highly disciplined. I mean, the Republicans in the U.S. House have the slimmest of margins, and of course, there's some big things they're trying to do that are far from certain. Right, they can
yes,
only lose a couple of votes, but um, there has been a level of cohesion. Trump, even relative to the first time around, seems to have truly enveloped the party. It is
yes,
truly his party now. And so as we battle this out, Democrats, eventually there will have to be a cohesion. It's the tricky part, right? You're trying to simultaneously build a wide enough tent that you can build, that 55% or more of America who's open
yes,
to what you're selling, at the same time that you need the cohesion when you get into governance to be able to somehow get stuff turned into law that you hope will make a positive difference. I mean, it's not beanbag, as they say. And it's why I think anybody thinking about running has my undying respect. This is not easy. It's a hard time. So talk a little bit. I appreciate your time. We've gone a little past one, but folks kept rolling in, and you've been generous with your time. So tell us a little bit about what your thought process is, your time frame. How are you looking at the days and weeks to come as you think about this potential congressional run?
yeah. I mean, as of now, I'm just focused on having as many conversations as humanly possible with all different kinds of people. I've been approached by literally all different sides of the ideological spectrum, in earnest, not in a cynical way. I think, even some people in Trump world who are disaffected, some people in libertarian circles who are disaffected, certainly Democrats, activists, progressives. So all people from the labor community, all different kinds of people have, and that's nationally and locally here. So that's really encouraging because to me, it's truly not about me. And I know that even now, as I say that, I'm like, wow, that sounds really political, but it doesn't, I mean it genuinely. It's not about me. If I thought that somebody else would be able to offer this strong of a critique of the party with tough love, with the intention of building up the party to be something so much better for people and for working people in particular, then I would reconsider even talking to people. And so I'm kind of dancing around it in that frame of mind. I haven't heard that yet addressed from the early chatter. I'm certainly open to hearing it from other people if they want to make it. But I'm sensing a real desire from the conversations that I've been having the past, recent days and weeks here, around that. So that's kind of where I'm focused on. I don't know if I have a specific time frame for you, but yeah, it's been really overwhelming in a good way. Very encouraging.
Oh, that's good. It's an exciting time. And look, I think activists are eager to speak with folks, whether it's at the federal level, statewide, state Senate, state rep. It's not too early to be. There's an audience out there that's open to having those kind of conversations. And I have found whether people become candidates or explore it and then end up not, wherever they end up on the spectrum, um, I have always learned more than I've
Mm.
taught when I've been out on the hustings,
Oh
and
yeah.
and it makes you a better citizen. And obviously, if you end up running, it's going to make you a better candidate, obviously, and a better lawmaker down the line. So we will definitely keep tabs on that. I think we're almost at 40 minutes. This goes by fast, and I appreciate that folks kept rolling in. So a few things, Hannah, is if folks want to follow you in any way, if any, always a good time to pitch whatever you'd like.
Yeah.
Feel free.
Thank you. Yeah, so we set up a very preliminary landing page to get early signatures of people who may be interested, who can reach out and share their thoughts about what is important to them in this exploratory time. And that website is Meet, MEET, Hanna, HANNA, no H on the end. So HANNA, and then Trudo, TRUDO.com. Pronounced like the Canadian Prime Minister, but spelled differently. So two different spellings there. But and then on Twitter, I'm at HC Trudeau, TRUDO for Twitter or X, which has really gone downhill, I should say, since Elon bought it. But that goes without saying.
It really does. The Twitter as a platform, part of what got me looking at Substack is it encouraged the longer form, which is not for everybody, but I also felt like in their notes section, which kind of plays the role of their Twitter feed, it looks a little like that. It's not spewing with bots and negativity and people looking for gotcha. And that there's some really great conservative, moderate, and liberal voices, folks, obviously non-political, but I found it to be a really positive place in general. Hopefully it'll remain that way, because it seems like a lot of these platforms start pretty well, but then something eventually happens, so that's great. Ladies and gentlemen, some of you I know hopping in at the last minute. This is Hanna, HANNA, Trudo, TRUDO, right? A couple opportunities there to misspell, but don't do it. And we will be, this has been recorded, so I'll be posting this in a number of ways. We'll get an email out to folks. You can share this. We'll have it up on my Substack page, which is stevemarchand.com. We'll have it on the YouTube page. It's these days, if you don't promote yourself, who will?
No, you're doing an amazing job on Substack. It's awesome. Like, you're at the forefront of all of this, and you are beating like some of the national folks in the media. Like, that's amazing.
I couldn't believe it. I mean, it was we're up well above 12,000 subscribers, and it has I think there's a real appetite for politics in general. It's thoughtful. Again, it's not for everybody. There's not a lot of 200-word, bits here. Some of these are a couple thousand words. They're more magazine, and they're not every day because of it. The shorter stuff, but a couple times a week you get the longer form with a lot of data, some thought, and hopefully a lot of a lifetime of experience in New Hampshire politics, and getting along the way to meet great people, whether they're journalists or candidates or journalists who are potential candidates. You get to meet everybody, some real good folks along the way. So this is Hanna Trudo, everybody.
Comments. Somebody I went to high school with's mother just tuned in and said hi. A girl that I went to high school with. So
look at this.
I love this so much, because
this is great.
She mentioned Melissa Phillips' mom, who I remember, which is a wonderful, wonderful family in Amherst. So,
oh man, we played Sauhegan. I went to Goffstown High School. We played Sauhegan in some sports, and we had mixed success. Then again, our team had mixed success in general. So that's a whole nother broadcast. So anyway, we will be back in touch. Everybody, please follow Hanna as she explores here this process, and is a wealth of knowledge from experiences that are not the everyday experiences of somebody thinking about running for federal office. It's pretty cool. So thank you, Hanna, so much for taking time today. We'll get this out to the world.
Thank you, Steve. So good.
All right. Thanks, Hanna.
Thanks, everyone, for tuning in.
All right. Thanks, everybody.